All right, we are recording. Hi, MilSpouse Creatives. I'm Monique Jefferson, the founder and creator of the MilSpouse Creative. And today we are having a military spouse influencer interview with Corie Weathers. She is a author, military spouse, a mother, and she is it's a counselor, right? I want to make sure I have the word.
Yes. Yes, I'm a professional counselor. Mm-hmm.
By trade. And I met Corie last year at the town hall, and I heard her speak, and y'all, it chills. Like I can relate to your book. I mean, thinking about it, I read the book, I'm already like teary-eyed. Like, the book really spoke to me. I had just been through my first deployment with my spouse. And when I heard you speak that day, like, I just couldn't stop crying. And so I'm so excited. Thank you for being with us today and just taking a time out to like really chat with us and tell us about yourself and your business and all of that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and, just all the good stuff.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. First of all, I am so excited to have this conversation in particular, because I think it is really good for us spouses to come together and share our creative energy and share how we do this life, because it's very challenging and it's unique to each of us. And yet there's a lot of things that I think we all have in common too. So about me, we've been in the Army, I would say technically for like 12 years, but active duty for about 8 years, probably about 9. We are in our 4th assignment now in Virginia. And we've been through 2 deployments and one weird one where he went to Australia for a little while. But I'm a licensed professional counselor, like you said. So before we even got into the Army, I started off as, I knew I was going to go into counseling. I was working towards my licensure in a state. So I always knew that I wanted to do that. But as we joined active duty, it really was, oh no, how am I going to make this work? And having small children too, having a season of choosing motherhood instead of career. And that's a whole other topic we might get into. But so I did a combination of working a little bit, but really volunteering with my husband, who's a chaplain. So what I do and what he does really goes well together. So did a lot of that, a lot of marriage retreats. Our focus has always been on keeping the family together throughout all this chaotic stuff in this lifestyle. And then going back to work, I really invested myself into how could I invest in the community, the mental health community where I was at. Everywhere we went became my passion. And from that came, and work with Gold Star families. From that came the Military Spouse of the Year Award in 2015. And then things kind of went crazy after that.
I've been
a little crazy. So for me to unpack the last 2 years would take this entire time together. So we'll maybe get into some of that. But I'll say right now, a lot of what I'm doing is some clinical work. I do some online distance clinical work. Some of that through the Chris Kyle Frog Foundation. I also consult nonprofits from kind of a clinical angle. So it's like a organizational psych perspective of how do I help these nonprofit businesses really make the difference that they're trying to make within the military community, instead of just either throwing money at a problem or whatever. So I'm really enjoying a kind of a new creative way to adjust my career in a way that can go across state lines and do more consulting work. So that's a lot of what I'm doing now. But I will say I have recently signed up as an FRG leader, so I'm still in the thick of it.
So yeah, that's a big responsibility, actually.
It is.
So let me ask you a question just to backtrack. So before you guys were active duty, did you already have like your career in place, or were you going to school? How did that look like before you married your spouse?
Yeah. Well, we took turns putting each other through seminary. So active duty was not even on the radar. In fact, I was in school first, finishing my master's degree at seminary, when he came home one day and said he wanted to be a chaplain, which was not anything that I thought that would ever come across in conversation. And so I'll be honest, we share this with a lot of people, so it's not too much of a surprise, but I'll share that I told him no, actually. I told him, we needed to wait a little bit longer. And I know the look on your face is you told him no. I don't know why I did. I do think it was a little bit of a shock. It's like one of those things that you want to sign on the dotted line before you get married, I guess. But I just wasn't sure if this was something that he really had a passion for, or if it was just something that day. So we waited like 2 years before we officially said this is the right direction to go. So at that time, I was done with school. I was pursuing the experience that I needed in order to get my license when we went in.
So you already like knew what you were wanting to do. You had already been on the journey, and now you're a military spouse. So you're a military spouse. All of a sudden, when was the moment you were like, oh, this is what being a military spouse is. This is how it's going to affect my personal life, my career, my goals, and my dreams. Like, what was that moment you're like, oh, this is what it means to be a mil spouse?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer, I think, because I think you probably would agree with this, is that these aha moments you have as a military spouse come in stages. It's like layers, and so I would say even that trip overseas last year was another huge aha moment of this is what it means to be a military spouse. But I think the first one was probably our first assignment was way away from family. And I don't know if I would say if it was the deployment. I think it had to be, he deployed 9 months afterwards, and they had said that it was going to be a rough deployment, but I just thought everybody said that. I think it probably was when things really did get rough during that deployment. And I realized, wow, this is, I won't go into the whole story, but we had a huge attack on some of our soldiers in a very vulnerable spot. We had about 400 Taliban insurgents that overran one location that we had of only 52 guys. And it was 52 guys versus 400 Taliban. And the last time that I had heard from my husband, he was supposed to be there.
Oh, wow.
And my husband's a chaplain, and he can't carry a weapon. So I think that was one of the biggest moments that I realized, not only was I a military spouse, but I was a lot like a lot of other military spouses whose service member whose husband is actually in danger. And at that point, I think I realized, wow, I have a lot to lose. Not just my career, not just the convenience of normal, I guess, civilian life, but also my spouse.
Right, right. So when your spouse went away, how did you did you start pursuing your career, or did you put it on hold for a while because this is transitioning, let me see what's going to work? Like, did you do mom first? And then, like, for me, I say a lot of people know my story. I was a stay-at-home mom for 11 years, and like I grew wild hair one day, and I was like, I'm working and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it, and I'm working at my computer, and just leave me alone, and I cannot make homemade food anymore. Like, what did you put it on the back burner? Did you continue to pursue it? Like, what was that transition like?
This is an interesting question, because I've thought a lot about what would I say to myself back then, knowing what I know now. And in some ways I did put it on hold because I had to, even though I was working on a Georgia license, they moved us to Colorado and I didn't have a license there. So, but I will tell you, I put it on the back burner only in the sense that I knew that my first priority was to make sure the kids were okay and make sure that my family succeeded. And so I didn't want to put that at jeopardy. And work so hard on a career when I have these little ones that are depending on me, especially during this deployment. So in that sense, in my mind, I put it on the back burner. But I think what I would want to tell everybody out there, because you keep using this word creative, and it's a huge word for me too, and that during that time that I put my family first, I still did things creatively in order to be able to show that I was still kind of staying in there in that career, so that I didn't abandon it completely. Right. So the ways in which I volunteered my time was using my clinical education and experience. So it's not like, sure, I will go and volunteer and help put up streamers, and I'll help bring something for a potluck, but you don't need me to go and set up an event when I have the skill and training to help with casualties.
Right.
So
right.
I really instead put a lot of my volunteer focus time on what it was that I loved to do. And even though I wasn't getting paid for that, by volunteering to work with care teams, to train care teams, to work with these Gold Star widows, I was at the same time still working on my career, if that makes sense, just in a very creative way.
You were practicing.
Yep. I did. And I'll tell you, I would say this to any other person who's got issues with licensure and state to state stuff. Really look at the rules and regulations of your particular state that you're working towards, because you can always find loopholes. You can always find that one thing that they did not mention in rules and laws. And so at that time, I was able to count all of my unit volunteer experience towards what I needed to work on my licensure.
Oh, wow. And wow. Like,
by looking into the loopholes. Awesome. Yes.
That is amazing. I didn't nobody
because
asked that.
At the time, there was nothing in the rules that said that you had to be paid. It just said you needed a supervisor, which I had. You had a director. And by the way, my director was the FRSA because she was overseeing my hours.
Right.
So be creative and look for those loopholes for sure.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good point that you're bringing about. A lot of times as spouses that are entrepreneurs or creatives or have a license or something like that, that they have to be creative and where they're using it and keeping their skills up and building their portfolio and their resume. At one point, I remember somebody telling me volunteering doesn't matter. Right? I know some people it doesn't matter. It doesn't go on your resume. It's not important. And I was like, but I'm practicing like all these things that I was doing for communications and organizing and PR, free PR and all of this has been building my resume and keeping my skills because I haven't been working. I haven't been getting paid, right? So I always tell young spouses, like, wherever you can volunteer, because it really does look really good on your resume. So, and that's a whole nother that's a whole nother beast right there. That whole put this on there, all these gaps. Ugh, don't even get me started. I get so mad about it. So just to bring it back, I love these conversations because there's so much information can be shared. Do you feel like in the transition, so now your spouse is gone, you guys are moving, you're not getting paid for, your passion, which is your clinical work, which you love, but you're still practicing it. Do you feel like in somewhere in there maybe, I had this conversation with somebody else the other day. They said they felt resentment, like they were resentful to the military. They were resentful to their spouse. They felt kind of yucky about the situation that they were in, and they felt trapped, like they couldn't do anything about it. Do you ever feel like that? Like, I know now you have the app and you have your book and you're doing all of this really great stuff, but in there, between here and there's stuff in the middle, right? To get. Yeah. And how did you get there? How did you feel? Have you ever felt like that in transitioning your career and building your career?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I still have days that are like that. There's so many moments that I could tell you about of sitting across the table from my husband with me in tears, of feeling behind in my career. How am I going to fit in here? How do I get a job here? Or should I be working here? Or, if I'm staying home, which I love to do, what do I do with this other part of me that really wants to make a difference outside of the home too? So absolutely, I have felt that resentment. And I think one of the things that helped me was when I was doing a lot of clinical work and counseling for military spouses, it was like the number one issue that was coming into my office. And I think when spouses have that safe place to really like take off the patriotic mask, and have it all together. Like when you take off that mask, there is that resentment. And I think that's one of the reasons why the book that I wrote really has resonated with a lot of spouses, because I name that resentment. I do talk about how resentful I was, and I didn't realize just how bad it was.
Right.
That life is hard. This life of moving all the time. And for a lot of us, our service member, our soldier coming home different. We didn't want that. We didn't sign up for that either.
And always being second. Like I
Yes.
feel for so long, I'm like, why am I
Yes.
always second? Why am I second, third, fourth, fifth? Like
Yeah.
I have something to offer in this relationship and this life as well. And
Yeah.
you get tired of you get that aha moment where you're like, I'm doing
Yeah.
something and this is what I'm doing. And I don't know for you if there was a transition with your spouse, you had to sit down and say, this is what I'm doing. I'm writing this book. A lot of this means that I have to set time to write. These
Yeah.
are going to be long hours. There's going to be a commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys have a conversation about that? How was that transition and how did it affect your family life? Like, was there a big change and shift in the house if you were the one doing everything all the time or providing a
Yeah.
service in that position?
When you say transition to what?
So like, for example, for myself, when I was a stay-at-home mom, I did like everything. I didn't have meetings and times to sit down and
Mm-hmm.
write for myself or reach out to build my clientele or research or read for my business or for my talent or my
Mm-hmm.
skill set. So when my kids were like, what are you doing? Why are you not
Mm-hmm.
sweeping? Why are you not picking us up? Why is somebody else picking us up? Why can't we do this? Or why can't you be here at my event? And it's because
Mm-hmm.
I'm working out or I'm doing certain things. And so the family has to shift, right? So there has to be
Right.
a shift in the family dynamics now because now mommy is not the go-to. I mean, in my
Yeah.
house, that's how it went.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's in your
Yeah.
house. I mean, did you find that transition to be hard on you personally? Did you struggle with that? And what kind
Yeah.
of things in place did you put? Like, my kids now have more chores than they've had in their life. I'm like, you gonna clean the toilet? Like I'm like, you're 10, you're 12.
Right. It's
No.
true. It's true. Yes. So I would say definitely we've been through that transition several times, actually, back and forth kind of in different ways. The military spouse of the year thing was a huge transitional shift for us in that way. I mean, before that, I was working part-time. That was kind of a little bit more than part-time. And it was costing a lot for my husband, who was the one coming home at lunch and setting up the crock pot, or he was the one, it was easier for him to change his schedule crazy enough than for me to completely cancel sessions with clients who are really needing that session. And so we found ourselves in this place where it was like, wow, you have to be more flexible than me. And I've always been the military spouse that puts my whole world and schedule around whatever's going on with you. And so there was a lot of conversations, and still to this day, we have to communicate a lot and really well, not just about our schedule, but also our feelings about that.
Mm-hmm.
I will be honest and say that at the end of all of that, after, when the MSOI awards came, it was coming out of that season where we had just transitioned, where I was working. Then the MSOI happened, and then I was traveling 2-3 times a month. Then I had the big trip overseas, and then all of a sudden we think it's over, but no, Corie's going to write a book that she has to write in 3 weeks.
Right.
And so it was, I think my husband felt like, when is this going to end? I'm ready for this to go back to normal. And I'm ready for it to kind of go back to me revolving around his schedule again. And so we had to deal with a lot of that resentment for him. And I think for us, what we realized is that we had switched places and we found great value in that. So my husband started to realize, wow, is this what you've been feeling all this time? Is this what you've been feeling as a military spouse? Because now I just had like this mental image of him carrying my bags behind me filled with shoes or something, like, not that was actually happening, but that's how my world was feeling.
Right.
So I think lots of communication. And did I struggle with that? Absolutely. Because suddenly I started to feel like what it's like for me to be the one that's busy and working. And I got to see the other side of that too. And so I think nowadays, I look at this whole balance thing, like we're all striving for a balance. I look at it as seasonal now. Instead of me trying to put pressure on myself to have the ultimate balance every day of being a mom and a wife and having a career, I think I now see it that there's going to be seasons that I'm going to be intensely busy and I'm going to really need the support of my spouse. But that season needs to probably adjust or end at some point. If it's a forever season, then we can find ourselves really resentful and taking advantage of each other. But if at the end of that season, I can relax and say, okay, now it's my turn to kind of serve you or serve the kids or be there when I couldn't be there the day before, that I'm finding that I have a lot more grace for myself, and we have a lot more grace for our relationship in our marriage when we see it as seasonal and not so much like every day kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just you are taking it in seasons. So like, you're not always going to be available, but your spouse. So now this is, my husband's available and he's doing all these things, and vice versa. I know that for me, it was really hard because I was a stay-at-home mom. Is like, if he called me and said, hey, I can have lunch today, I'd drop everything. I can meet him for lunch. I could be at this event or be at this luncheon or be at this whatever. And anything, whatever, whatever. And then when I started my business last year, and even before then, when I was writing, and I'm like, hey, I have to write today. I have this blog and I have to submit this to this organization. And there is a huge shift in my relationship where my husband was like, was like, what
happened?
Why are you not at the door waiting for me with like, dinner's not done. I'm just starting, like, listen, dinner doesn't get done here anymore until like 5:30, 6 o'clock. Usually I had dinner done at 5 o'clock. We were waiting, and now I'm like, if you can make it, you can make it. If you can't, you can't.
Yeah.
And that caused a lot of issues in my relationship, with him feeling like I'm not there for him anymore. So because we've been together for 20 years, and so it's always been like him, his career, his training, what's good for the family and the retirement and the training and the deployment. And we're looking at the future long-term in the military. The whole time I'm just like passing by, and now I'm like, it's not about you all the time. And in there lies a lot of transition, which I know a lot of spouses go through that. But I like the way that
and I think the last thing that I would say, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I like the way that you said that it's in seasons. Like, it's not always going to be you're here all the time or daddy. It's going to be back and forth. And I think you're saying to communicate and know that your position is there for now and mine is here, but it's not forever. So I love that.
Yeah. And especially if you're relocating all the time, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing in the next place. And it could be a lighter load than what I have now. I think the last thing that I would say about that is that just to those that are listening to this conversation, to really, I think it's important to listen to our spouse, that we have to it does take a lot of communication, because we have the same conversations. My husband, like I said, at that one point was he was exhausted, to be frank. I mean, he was trying to hold up the job and the kids, and if they were sick, he would have to leave work and I couldn't be there. And he was exhausted at some point, and I had to listen to that. That was really important, because I could have, thrown my hand up and said, it's my turn. I've been doing this around you for a long time, and it's my turn to figure it out, right? I could have done that. But here my spouse was, and he was exhausted, and he needs me too. And so I really had to check the things in my own life that I could change, adjust, whatever. And at the end of the day, I had to keep saying to myself, if my marriage isn't going to succeed, then to hell with all this other stuff.
Right. And
there's that balance again, right?
Right. So you brought up another really good point where you said, you do it, I've been doing it. I'm not going to lie. I felt like that in the beginning, girl. I was like, you think I'm busy? Or see how it feels to be in this situation for a little bit.
Right.
And muster there. I'm not going to lie. When it started happening and he was like, where are you? You're so busy. I'm like, oh, well, there's no food. Go to the grocery store. That's what I do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like all these things. But now it's been like a little over a year, and I realize I have to be a little softer, because I learned how to adjust my life around him in small stages. See, I didn't just like,
that's right.
And see, like, I just came in and I'm just like, just so you know, I started a business. Just so you know, I'm not available Monday through Friday from 9 to 2, just, like all these things. And I look back on it now and I'm like, wow, that was really, really ugly of me, or really selfish of me. But I feel like at that moment, that's how I felt like, whatever, you figure it out, like you said. But I love that you said that it's in seasons. I love that you're saying communication is the key, and then it's never going to be a permanent situation. I want to find out a little bit more about your new app, Life Giver, correct?
Yes.
I want to say, first of all, I love it. I love everything you're doing, just so you know. I love
Thank
everything
you.
she's doing. I'm like, wow, she's such a influencer in her field, and you're doing so many great things for our community. Tell me a little bit about um, what brought that up.
Mhm.
Uh, how hard was it to create an app? Because I don't even know how to do that. Like, tell us a little bit about that, like your passion.
Well, I've been doing the Life Giver podcast for, oh goodness, a year and a half now, and I love it. I really enjoy it, and it's given me some really great opportunities to interview some great people. Part of it came out of a survey I did like a year ago that said that everybody was enjoying the audio, but some of them wanted video at their convenience.
Mm-hmm.
And some people like to listen to things, and some people like to watch things, and some people are in a workspace where they can turn on a video and work while they're listening or whatever. So I realized, number one, that there's a need for variety out there. I think as far as 2016, 2017 goes, the marketing strategies are really that the culture is actually going more towards video than they are more than anything else.
Right. Yes.
So I knew that to be true as well. But I think where it really came from was when I look for marriage resources, especially from military out there, there's not that much.
No.
I mean, now we can pull from marriage resources from any bookshelf, any Barnes and Noble, whatever. But as far as military specific or even first responder specific marriage resources, there's not a whole lot out there. And so I wanted to create something that was interactive, that was kind of a one-stop shop. The podcast was already doing great with getting content out there, but I wanted the app to be a place where you could listen if you wanted to, that you could watch the videos if you wanted to, but that I could also do things like marriage curriculum or just like a simple marriage encouragement or whatever. But I could have a place where I could ask a question and you could fill in your answer, like follow along the video and fill in your answer, and it saves within your phone. We have this Enliven Marriage curriculum where there's 12 weeks of curriculum for you to better your marriage. And this gives you the ability to answer the questions right within the app. And in a really cool way, you can email your answers to your spouse who might be in Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever,
Right.
and straight from the app. So I wanted something that was interactive, and it's free, and it's honestly, it's another volunteer effort of mine. This is not something that I make money off of. This was just something that I said, here's the clinical experience that I have. Here's my heart and my intention for marriages. And I just wanted something in the palm of your hand that you could say, I'm discouraged today. And what can I look on my device, whether I'm sitting on a bus or in the metro or I'm at home with my screaming children, and I can just open an app on my phone and find some encouragement right there. I don't have to like search for it and be discouraged when I can't find it. So that's where it came from.
I love
as far as building it, this is where I think our creativity and grit as military spouses, just how it unfolds in my life, at least, that I have slowly over the past probably 5 to 10 years, I guess, I learned how to build websites slowly, sometimes a lot from Googling, how do you do that?
Yeah.
So, and that turned into podcasting. How do you start a podcast and how do you make the podcast better? And then that turned into, okay, how do I do an app, and what apps are out there doing what it is that I'm kind of wanting to do? And then when I found a company that's able to make a very streamlined, easier process for me. So I'm not doing complete code, but it's something that I can also reach out to them and go, hey, I need this app to do something even more different than what it's originally designed to do. So it's really about what your passion is. And then just sometimes that's the great thing about being a military spouse and not necessarily being nailed down to anything for 20 years, right? You can have these seasons where you're like, I don't know what to do with myself. I think I'll figure out how to make an app. So
I love it. And I like that you outsourced. In the creative world, that's a really big thing we talk about is outsourcing. Is everybody thinks that you have to have a lot of money or whatever, but everybody can outsource something, whether it's 10, like for me, just I outsource. I have a communications manager. I have her do, 15 hours a month or 10 to 15 hours a month. And it's beneficial for me because I can actually concentrate on my talent or my skill set. And so by you outsourcing that helps you concentrate on your skill set, which is writing the material or doing the podcast or, whatever, where you're not doing something that it's not your jam. You know what I mean? Like you're
Yeah.
hearing it with somebody else. So let me ask you a question about just in general. What if you could give a military spouse 3 words of advice if she wanted to write a book or start a podcast like you have, or even create an app? What would be your three things advice to give to her to do?
Okay, to a military spouse who wanted to do any of those things, let's say, patience for yourself, to not try to do it all in one day, because we do have sometimes children to feed and a husband to pay attention to.
Yeah, right.
And if you're anything like me, I can go tunnel vision sometimes on a project, and so I have learned to listen. This would be number 2. It's not a one word though. Well, I'll make it one word.
No,
Listen.
it's okay. It could just be a whole.
Okay. Okay, patience is the first one.
Yes.
Listen is the second one. And I can kind of break that up a little bit. So listen, I would say you have to listen to your spouse, because your spouse can see red flags or great ideas that you may not be able to see. And so a lot of the stuff that I have done, I have to give my husband credit for, but he is very talented in strategy, and I'm not. I'm talented in building relationships, and there's a learner part of me that loves to learn how to make a great podcast, or I love doing the research, and that's where I can get tunnel vision. But he has a great talent to be strategic and look into the future. And there's been a lot of times, and the app is a good example of that. He was the one that said, you need an app. And I was like, what is that for? And for a long time, I had to trust him, and I moved forward on creating the app. And the whole time I was creating it, I was like, I can't see it. I cannot see what this is going to be able to do. But he kept saying, I can see it. Trust me. Right. I can see how this can benefit other people. And I just have, the way I'm naturally made, I have a difficult time seeing the things in the future actually unfolding, whereas he can see the strategy. So when I say listen, I also have to listen to him when he goes, hey, tunnel vision girl, like you need to step away from the computer and you need to pay attention to everybody. And I let him hold me accountable to that. So if I'm spending too much time on a project, I listen to his wisdom because there's things he can see that I can't see. I think, let's see, a third one that I would say is excellence, honestly. It's a huge passion of mine that if you're going to do something that you love to do, be willing to do it with excellence. Oh, wow. A lot of people jump in and they say, this sounds like fun, and let's jump in. And what happens is if your heart really isn't in it, and if you're not going to spend the time making it great, then it's muddying the waters. Yeah. Lakeisha Cole, who was another military spouse of the year before me, who has a great business, I interviewed her one time, and one of the things that she said that actually surprised me is that sometimes she said, if you don't have a pure passion for something, sometimes it's okay to walk away. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of surprised to hear her say that, because I thought you'd say, like, keep trying and keep working at it. But I think if you're going to do something, then really put your heart into it and make it great. Don't just make it okay, make it great. And sometimes waiting, this is something I also learned, I think, from my husband's accountability, is that sometimes I'm tempted to kind of throw something out there and see where it lands. And he will say, wait just a little bit longer and work on this or that, or tweak this or that before you put it out there. Yeah. And what ended up happening is the app is gorgeous because I took my time. So I would say be excellent at what you do without beating yourself up. You know the difference, right?
Yeah, I think, and I think then when you're an entrepreneur or you're a creative, you want to hurry up and get it out there, and you want it to be perfect, great, and you're rushing it. But I think the whole time you're rushing the process, and sometimes you're rushing something that's going to come to you. We were listening to a Bible verse or something the other day. It was about, I can't remember, but she got pregnant. Mm-hmm. She wanted her to have a baby because she couldn't have a baby. And so she rushed it, and, her husband had a baby. Anyway.
Sarah, yes, and Hagar, okay. Yes.
I couldn't remember the name.
Yeah, Sarah was promised a child, and she was supposed to wait for it. And instead, Abraham had a child with Hagar. Right, and thus stemmed a lot of conflict with Isaac versus Ishmael. Yes, absolutely.
And we were talking about that. It's so good because I was talking about it, and I was thinking, I'm making some changes in my entrepreneur career. And he's like, you need to be patient. Remember what
Yeah.
happened? And I said, oh, you're right. I need to wait.
Yeah.
No, but I love that you said excellence, because sometimes we put our hats in we put too many hats on, trying to do too many
Yeah.
things. And but I think watching you grow and just being able to observe,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's been a nice growth for you. And I love the way that you've
Thank
stuck to
you.
your passion and that you've stayed true to who you are. And I just admire everything you're doing. I mean, it is really great for our
Thank you.
to have that source out there, to have that. And now that it's on the phone, I have the app on the phone. I was looking at it and reading it. I think that people will be able to, like you said, just grab it, relate to it really quick, get something inspirational, watch something. So I'm really excited for you. I'm really happy that you have the app and it's out there into the world. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to second what you said about timing is so crucial. It's really easy to look on the outside at some of the stuff that I've put out in the last year or two and think, wow, she's got it all together. Or I don't know, maybe some people are saying that, but I try to be pretty vulnerable.
It does. It's an image. It is an image.
It is. And my name has kind of become a brand, and I'm proud of that because I've worked really hard at that. But behind the scenes, it's been an incredible growth time for me personally, my character. The amount of patience and timing has been almost excruciating at times. Just to give you an example, when I first got Military Spouse of the Year, by the way, Military Spouse of the Year, that entire year, I think I either broke even or went into the red for that year. It looks like I was traveling and maybe earning some money and maybe got a job and whatever. And honestly, like nothing came. I mean, the stuff came from the year, but it wasn't like maybe what it appeared on the outside. And I remember, when I first got that, I did get a job offer. And it was with a nonprofit that I, going into it, thought this would be the ultimate stay-at-home job. But something didn't feel right. And I had no reason to be able to say what that was, but it just didn't feel right. Well, about the same time, I was having these conversations with Chris Kyle Frog Foundation that was leading to nothing. I mean, at the time, it was just getting to know you a little bit. But I felt personally so drawn towards the message and the vision of the Chris Kyle Frog Foundation that we had a similar passion. But here this job opportunity was presented, and it was actually money. And then this other thing over here was not. Right. And eventually, if I almost put all of my eggs in that first basket. And I actually negotiated for the first time, and the job didn't work out. And it was kind of a weird moment. And I had another season of like nothing, no income, nothing. And it was a very difficult season. But it took and has taken a year and a half to build a solid, trusting, working relationship with the Chris Kyle Frog Foundation, to where we are able to partner and actually work together and it be part of my career. But I wouldn't trade that for anything, even though it took a year and a half to actually build that relationship. That's before we could actually start working. It is a lot of patience. So I just want to say, sometimes it is, especially when we're moving all over the place, tempting to just jump. And I've also had situations where I jumped into the first counseling job that I could find in the area and look back and say that was the worst idea that I had ever had. So patience is key, and timing is important, and wait for that excellent thing without adding so much pressure on yourself to be perfect. Because I'm not talking about perfection. I'm just saying, do your best at whatever it is you feel that you love to do.
I love it. Girl, you just got so much knowledge. I'm serious. Like sitting here, you said excellence. I would have never thought of that. Like for me, I would have thought about it in a different context. You know what I mean? Yeah. Excellence as perfect and no flaws and amazing. But I love that. I love that so much. I'm so excited that you're able to chat with us and,
thank you.
To just, be a little transparent, a little vulnerable. I know you do a lot of that in your book on sacred spaces. And I love that book. I think I already said that. So
I think I zipped my heart open during that book.
It does. For real. I can't. Like the first chapter, I was like crying. My husband's like, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "You don't understand."
That, I will say, that was the hardest thing for me to do, to be that vulnerable. And
Yeah.
my goal is to continue to be that vulnerable, because I think we need to hear that more. I think you're right.
Yeah, and I think like there's so many organizations and people just like scraping the surface as nobody's planting seeds and
Mm-hmm.
allowing them to grow, like really showing that, hey, I'm not perfect. I wrote this book, but it took me this, and it was
Mm-hmm.
hard for me and my family and this and that. And I think it's important for people to see influencers like yourself in the MilSpouse community be transparent and vulnerable and really say, hey, I'm successful now, or this has happened, but these are all the things that you have to go, everybody goes through something. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but you're going to find your way. You're going to find your voice. You're going to find your brand. And I love that about you. And I can't wait to see you in a few months.
Yeah, I know.
So make sure you get
Can
your tickets.
Absolutely. Can I say one last thing? Because you brought up something important. Um, I think authenticity is, no matter what your career field is, no matter what it is that you're doing, authenticity is part of excellence. When you're trying to put out a product, when you're trying to do a job, when you're, whatever it is that you guys are doing out there, I will say from experience that you can put your knowledge out there and it's received a whole lot differently than when you put yourself out there and you put yourself out as an authentic person.
Yeah.
And so there's been so many times that I thought about writing a book, but none of them would have done well. It was when there was a stirring in me, when I felt the need to be authentic and I knew that people were going to relate to it, that the timing was right as well to push that out. So whatever it is, I think anybody's doing, authenticity makes such a huge difference, and we need a whole lot more real stuff out there. So
Yeah.
thank you for what you're doing too, because I think that that's what you're working on and doing.
Yes, thank you. That is what I'm working on. People have an assumption about things, and I want to get that I want to get all that out of the way. Like, nobody's perfect. I recently have been putting myself more out there when I started the MilSpouse Creative, and just really just praying and hoping that I'm putting something out there that's of value, right? For me,
Right.
it's important to have a community for entrepreneurs and creatives, but to have it more on the side of the military spouse, because there's other communities doing this, right? But they don't understand what we're going through. They don't understand the struggle.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have struggles. Not to say that ours are any harder or whatever, but for us to have a community in that and support each other's businesses or support and growth, and just to encourage, to bloom where you're planted and to be authentic, I think it takes a lot. And for me, it's very vulnerable, and to say, hey, this is a community I'm making, and, reaching out to you, I felt very vulnerable, because I'm like, oh, she's written a book and she's soy and she's done all of this. She don't talk to me. I'm like a nobody here, But when you responded and you're so open and willing and just very authentic and very responsive, it just shows the kind of people that we do need to be around, and have that authenticity, putting what you want to do out there and sharing it with our community. I love that. And so I'm really so appreciative of you.
Yeah. Here's my secret. That is genuine.
Yeah.
I want to exist to make other people successful. And so when you come out and say, hey, this is the group that I'm doing, this is my vision, if it's possible for me to help you make that successful, then that's what's important to me.
Oh.
And the secret behind that, though, is that you build relationships through that. You build trust through that. And so whatever it is that our career is in, if we're about other people and about making them successful at whatever it is that we're doing in their life, then we do build that trust. And that's where I'm not quite so far away. I'm not quite so distant. We are very much the same. And then we work better together. So yeah, it's a secret that if anybody applies it to whatever job they're in, you'll get promoted, you'll get new opportunities. Be about someone else's success, and your career, your life, whatever, your volunteer efforts, whatever, will absolutely skyrocket.
Yes,
absolutely.
I agree with you 1,000%, because there's a lot of stuff that I do on volunteer, and the more I volunteer, the more I help and support spouses, the more I'm blessed. So I
Yes.
agree with you on that. And I hope that whoever watches this in our community, I hope that they take, if not anything, just one thing that you've gone through, if they want to write a book or they're going through a deployment, maybe to pick up your book to read it or download your app, and show that, hey, you can still be a spouse and be successful. Just be authentic, be patient, be excellent, and listen to your spouse. Oh, I got it all.
Good job.
So I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you so much. And you're such an influencer in our community. So if you ever need anything, please, let me know. I'll be happy to support you in any way, in any magnitude that I can. For our military spouse creative community, when this airs, I want you to ask questions. Corie's going to be available after if you want to ask any questions. All the information about her app, her book, her website is going to be available also on this thread. And Corie, when this launches or whatever, when we post this, you will be available to answer questions to anybody who has any kind of question about, being a counselor or writing a book or anything like that. So that's what this is all about. Creating community, with each other and bringing each other up and helping each other through this virtual world, right? Just bringing it together. So thank you so much for joining me, and creatives, I hope you've enjoyed this MilSpouse influencer interview from Corie Weathers, and make sure to follow up next week with our next one. I'll talk to you all later.